Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football landscape that could be changing the football landscape in the very near future. So today, obviously, we're going to go back through week 5, some of my thoughts from the biggest games in college football, plus we're going to look at my predictions. But on top of that, two major things have changed in college football, those being the firing of Paul Chryst and Karl Dorrell being at Wisconsin and Colorado, respectively. I want to talk about those two fires, and kind of why I think they did them, what I think of the move as a whole. So we're going to lead the show off with that. But before we fully jump into it, make sure you hit subscribe. I'm just trying to grow the channel. So with Wisconsin, we're going to start with Wisconsin first because it absolutely baffles me that Paul Chryst was let go. Now, if you don't know who Paul Chryst is, he's been at Wisconsin for a number of years, and all he's done there is win. He's done a lot of great things at the Wisconsin program, but the Badgers decided to let him go following a loss to Illinois, who, by the way, is a good football team this year. And this move that Wisconsin made to let go of Paul Chryst, I don't know why they did it or how they came to that conclusion. Quite frankly, it's embarrassing that what Wisconsin can do to a coach. And quite frankly, if I was the next guy that they want to bring in, I wouldn't be interested in the job purely because of how little dignity they gave Paul Chryst in his release. If you take out the COVID year and what they were likely headed for this season, Paul Chryst's worst record at Wisconsin was 8 wins. 8 wins, and they just fired him because he's off to a 2-3 start. Now, a lot of this does seem to play that they want Jim Leonhard to be the guy to step in, their current defensive coordinator, and that's who's taken the interim position. They want him to be the guy moving forward. It seems like they were scared of losing him, which, to some degree I understand. But riddle me this. How can you justify firing a head coach based on poor defense that allowed Illinois to win the game and then immediately promote the defensive coordinator who oversees said defense into the interim position and is seemingly the guy you want to take the job long term? I don't understand it. I don't even think Wisconsin understands it. I think they just got scared and thought Jim Leonhard was going to leave them. Now, again, think about what time of the year we're in right now. We are in the middle of football season. Unless they thought Nebraska was sending the offer letter over his way as the game was about to wrap versus Illinois, they could have kept him until the end of the year, Paul Chryst that is, and then offered Jim Leonhard the job. He wasn't going anywhere, at least not until the season concluded. You didn't have to worry about any of that. So to fire a coach that has done nothing but bring good things and good wins to the program that he's been at for however many years now is ridiculous to me. I don't understand it, nor will I ever. It's similar to the Bo Pelini and Nebraska fire. All they were doing was winning. Maybe it's not to the same level, but Wisconsin is not Michigan or Penn State or Ohio State or Michigan State. They are not those teams. They do not have the same recruiting pool. They do not have the same leverage or prestige that those other universities have. Wisconsin is Wisconsin. And the fact that they'd let go Paul Chryst, despite the fact that all he has done is win, I don't care that it was kind of a down year and they'd gotten off 2-3. That's whatever. The fact that they could do it at the time that they did was outright embarrassing. And to be honest, I hope Paul Chryst goes to his next university, does amazing things, and Wisconsin does fall quite a bit because you just don't do that to a head coach that's won you a lot of games. Now, the next one I'm definitely not nearly as passionate about. I actually agree with the call, even in the middle of the season, and that's Karl Dorrell being fired from Colorado, and for the large reason being he wasn't getting it done. This was supposed to be a make or break year. He was supposed to get over the hump, and he very clearly is not. He's the head coach, or was formerly the head coach of one of just 2 teams currently in college football that had not gotten a win yet. Ironically enough, the other one was Colorado State, but he had not set the program up to succeed. A lot of factors are going against Colorado right now being a successful program, but Karl Dorrell was the most removable one at this point. He had an 8-5 record at CU, and the Pac-12, the large reason for me focusing on this is how the Pac-12 is about to get weaker, so you've got to get caught up. You've got to get better. The Buffs just simply were not going to be able to do that with Karl Dorrell at the helm. As unfortunate as it is to say, I'm sure he'll land another job somewhere, whether that be in a coordinator's role or stepping down into the group of 5 and taking over a team down there. But just through and through, that was not the move to keep him around. Now the question lies on whether the AD should stick around, because obviously the Dorrell hire was not in his favor. That concludes those two head coaches. Obviously, Scott Frost, Herm Edwards, Jeff Collins have all been fired as well, but those two stick out more. I feel like you can just kind of copy and paste a lot of what I said about Karl Dorrell into the Jeff Collins conversation. Scott Frost and Herm Edwards simply lost the locker room. I didn't feel like there was just too much to grab onto with those ones, but with these ones happening literally this weekend, felt like you definitely needed to talk about them a little bit and at least get my rationing and my reasoning out there to make it a little bit clear. So we go now to the rest of college football, so to speak. I've got 5 big points that I took away from last week, and we start with what could have been considered, or what I would personally consider most likely, the largest game of the weekend in Kentucky versus Ole Miss. Now, Kentucky was on a roll. Ole Miss was quietly on a roll. I don't feel like they got nearly enough media attention coming into this game. There wasn't really a lot of buzz around them. And, personally, I did not think they were all that great of a program. In my predictions that we'll cover later, I said Kentucky was going to beat them and keep on rolling and keep this impressive season alive. I now have to admit that Ole Miss is a better team than I initially gave them credit for, but I'm still not in love with them. They are a ranked team. At the beginning of the season, whenever I did my end-of-year predictions, I said that they were going to be a bubble team, one of those first 3 out. I do think they'll finish with a ranked position with a number by their name. I don't know what it is that's detaching me from really liking the program, but they're a good football team that I'm just not fully bought into yet. Beating Kentucky was huge. Kentucky's a great football program this year, which still sounds weird to me to say. You've got Ole Miss, and they have one of the best running back duos in college football. That doesn't get talked about nearly enough, mostly because quarterback is the name of the game. Jackson Dart did come along a little bit in that Kentucky game, showed a little bit of promise. You had to enjoy that a little bit, but the real cherry on top for this team is coaching. Lane Kiffin has come into his own. He knows how to get the kids up to speed. He knows how to use the transfer portal, and he knows how to just make it all one cohesive unit, go out there and win a bunch of games, something that he's been doing since he arrived at Ole Miss. They'd rank around the 5th best SEC team for me, which that might be the true disconnect there. The fact that and the SEC is the dominant program in college football, but whenever you have to stack them up to Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee. Those 3 I do think are better. I know Tennessee I might get a little bit of flack, but I'm pretty confident in that one. And then I would debate back and forth on if Arkansas is better than Ole Miss. I think that might be a kind of a catalyst for why I'm underrating them, is because in their own conference they're still 5th best. In my mind, like Arkansas is obviously not ranked anymore. They're a fair bit lower than Ole Miss is on the AP poll, but just as far as talent, and if you played them against one another right now, who I think would win, I would think Arkansas would pull that game out. But I can't keep hating on them, or I wouldn't like to qualify it as hating, but in a sense it was, because I didn't think they could get the job done. But Lane Kiffin and his team and his way of building up that unit and that roster, they've proven me wrong. And I hope that they continue proving me wrong. I hope they finish out the year undefeated, knock off Bama and Georgia, do whatever, and win the national championship. That would be awesome. But I still don't get the feeling that they're quite made for the long run at the end of the day. So the next game I want to point to, Oklahoma State and Baylor. I had mentioned again in my predictions that I thought Oklahoma State was going to take a hold of the Big 12 and really seal their top spot, and while Kansas is certainly pushing that bill, I do think Oklahoma State firmly took a hold and is now the best team in the Big 12, especially after Oklahoma lost again. They just can't play the color purple. But yeah, I think Oklahoma State, and it was something I talked about in the beginning of the year, but I think Coach Mike Gundy is so good at building a roster. I said that I thought they'd be college football playoff contenders. It's starting to look like they could be. I'm not going to put that seal on them yet, but a lot of things are going the right way for them. Spencer Sanders, for example, he's taken a step forward. That's not something I expected to see this year. I figured they would still be a primary ground game and focus on their defense, but Sanders has 1,097 pass yards, 11 touchdowns, and you can add another 185 yards and 4 scores on the ground. The rush defense is 34 in yards allowed. They allow around 23 points a game, so nothing unmanageable for the offense to handle, and they're just a really well-balanced program. They know how to implement their game plan well. They are to a larger extent. And I think, again, because their conference is a little bit weaker, that it doesn't bother me as much. But they're similarly built to what Ole Miss has done. Granted, I think Ole Miss has more stars, but Oklahoma State does a similar thing where they just know how to put their guys in the right spot and implement the schemes to make them all work together and hit the ground running. So I think Oklahoma State, as the year progresses, so long as they don't take a big slip to an Oklahoma or something of that nature, I think that they're the real deal. And I think they could legitimately finish in a top 5, 6, 7 position whenever the season's over. The next team I want to talk about is UCLA, and they featured on my predictions. I'm kind of spoiling what happens at the end of this video when we talk about my full recap of my predictions, but UCLA I said would beat Washington and would slow down their train of momentum. They managed to do that. They managed to beat Washington, and the real key here is that UCLA should have been ranked a long time ago. I don't understand why they came into the Washington game unranked, but now that they've got that number besides their name, I think that they're not going to let that go anytime soon. They hit 5-0. You get a ranking on the AP. You can argue they should have been ranked prior to the Washington game, but the real fun and cool and interesting thing here is that Chip Kelly found it again in the Pac-12. You know, he's finally found his mojo, and granted, yes, that's helped with Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Zach Charbonnet looking very good at this point, but Chip Kelly, whenever he bounced to the NFL and had his really good year at Philadelphia, I was worried that you would see him go back down to college football and it wouldn't be the same and he couldn't find that same level. But at UCLA, I think he's well established that he has not lost what made him such a good head coach, and UCLA has found their footing. They've become a very good program, a team that, even though I haven't mentioned much of it, and I haven't seen a lot of other people mentioning much of it, I think they might be the true challengers to Lincoln Riley's USC squad moving forward, just because of how established Chip Kelly is as a coach, and because he's shown that he's going to make this thing work. Now, I am kind of surprised. We had a video way back when where I had talked about, Dream Fitz, that he could go back to Oregon. I'm surprised that it was a Pac-12 move that he ended up making. But now that he's back, something just works out there for him. And I think that UCLA has established themselves as a very formidable team in college football. So we've spent a lot of time talking about teams specifically. We haven't spent a whole lot of time talking about players. And a player that, while I have given praise to, it also comes at the downfall of his team, Sam Hartman. I think he might actually legitimately be a top 3 college football quarterback right now. It's hard to stop him, and he just keeps picking up big wins whenever he needs to. He keeps his team very, very close, like we saw against Clemson, and his numbers right now are absurd and even better than how he finished last year when everybody started to kind of finally know his name. Like, check this out. Nearly 1,200 through the air. I think he's about 4 yards short. 15 passing touchdowns, 2 interceptions. That's a big improvement over what he did last year. And again, that's kind of what started getting him some notoriety and starting to get people bought into him. And even though I am a Wake Forest disbeliever, if you will, Sam Hartman, he's just continuing to prove that he is an NFL caliber player, which I think is where he'll spend his Sundays at some point in time. And even if he does make it 2 Sundays, he's already proven that he is an elite college football whenever it really comes down to it. He knows how to make the plays. He's got the talent. He's got the ability to do so. And I think that his legacy at Wake Forest and his legacy just in college football is pretty well cemented to this point, despite a long career, but also kind of a short one as far as being well known across the country. So the last point I want to talk about, we remain in the ACC. It's Clemson. And while they continuously burn me on my rankings, we'll talk about it, they have proven to be one of the grittier teams in college football through these last pair of wins, because Wake Forest and NC State were probably 2 of the tougher teams that you can find on their schedule. And despite the fact that, those 2 schools kept it close and fought it out with Clemson, they keep managing to find a way to prevail. And they're not a team that's going to go down lightly, and that really makes them a threat, more so than I believe large blowout games would, because there's a certain comfortability in blowout games. There's a certain comfortability in knowing you're so much better than the opponent that I think that kind of backfires on you whenever you get to the playoffs or a bowl game or, conference championships or whatever. You haven't really seen that competition. You haven't really seen that pressure coming at you. Now that they've shown that they're going to go toe-to-toe with everybody, treat them the same, and really just duke it out till the end, I think that makes Clemson a better program at the end of the day. So before we go real fast, I want to go ahead and look at my predictions. So I went 2 for 5 again this week. I think it's 2 or 3 weeks in a row. I know it's 2 in a row, but I think it might be 3 at this point. So what I got right, UCLA slows down Washington, mentioned that. Oklahoma State takes a hold of the Big 12, I mentioned that. Things I got wrong, Kentucky rolling over Ole Miss. Obviously, Ole Miss came out on top of that one. The Texas Tech and Kansas State game, I said it was going to be electric and that Texas Tech would come out on top. I do think it was a very good game, but obviously I got if I wouldn't have thrown that, I think Texas Tech wins portion of things in there. I think I would have counted that as a right, but I threw that in there, so I can't. And then obviously Clemson crushes North Carolina. That didn't happen. Very close game. Ended up being a very good contest, and again, one I think Clemson will be better because of. So on Thursday, I think we'll have to kind of work around it. On Thursday, I should be posting my predictions for Week 6, talking about things of that nature, and then maybe some AP poll stuff, maybe looking at where these head coaches would be best off landing. Who knows? We'll talk about that. But for now, that is episode 37 of the From My Perspective podcast, and as always, I'll see you next time.